Hi Year 4, I hope you had a good weekend. Welcome to today's English lesson. Today we're going to be using descriptive language. But first of all, let's read the next chapter of our book and see what George gets up to next. Chapter 4 is called Animal Pills. At this point, George suddenly had an extra good wheeze. Although the medicine cupboard in the house was forbidden ground, what about the medicines his father kept on the shelf in the shed next to the hen house? The animal medicines. What about those? Nobody had ever told him he mustn't touch them. Let's face it, George said to himself. Hairspray and shaving cream and shoe polish are all very well, and they will no doubt cause some splendid explosions inside the old geezer. But what the magic mixture now needs is a touch of the real stuff. Real pills and real tonics, to give it punch and muscle. George picked up the heavy 3/4 full saucepan and carried it out the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight for the shed alongside the hen house. He knew his father wouldn't be there. He was out haymaking in one of the meadows. George entered the dusty old shed and put the saucepan on the bench. Then he looked up at the medicine shelf. There were 5 big bottles there. 2 were full of pills, 2 were full of runny stuff, and 1 was full of powder. I'll use them all, George said. Grandma needs them. Boy, does she need them. The first bottle he took down contained an orange-coloured powder. The label said, for chickens with foul pest, hen gripe, sore beaks, gammy legs, cockroolitis, egg trouble, broodiness, or loss of feathers, mix 1 spoonful only with each bucket of feed. Well, George said aloud to himself as he tipped in the whole bottle full. The old bird won't be losing any feathers after she's had a dose of this. The next bottle he took down had about 500 gigantic purple pills in it. For horses with hoarse throats, it said on the label. The horse-throated horse should suck 1 pill twice a day. Grandma may not have a hoarse throat, George said, but she's certainly got a sharp tongue. Maybe they'll cure that instead. Into the saucepan went the 500 gigantic purple pills. Then there was a bottle of thick yellowish liquid. For cows, bulls and bullocks, the label said. Will cure cowpox, cow mange, crumpled horns, bad breath in bulls, earache, toothache, headache, hoofache, tail-ache and sore udders. That grumpy old cow in the living room has every one of those rotten illnesses, George said. She'll need it all. With a slop and a gurgle, the yellow liquid splashed into the now nearly full saucepan. The next bottle contained a bright red liquid. Sheep dip, it said on the label. For sheep with sheep rot and for getting rid of ticks and fleas. Mix 1 spoonful in 1 gallon of water and slosh it over the sheep. Caution, do not make the mixture any stronger or the wool will fall out and the animal will be naked. By gum, said George, how I'd love to walk in and slosh it all over Grandma and watch the ticks and fleas go jumping off her. But I can't, I mustn't. So she'll have to drink it instead. He poured the bright red medicine into the saucepan. The last bottle on the shelf was full of pale green pills. Pig pills, the label announced. For pigs with pork prickles, tender trotters, bristle blight and swine sickness. Give 1 pill per day. In severe cases, 2 pills may be given, but more than that will make the pig rock and roll. Just the stuff, said George, for that miserable old pig back there in the house. She'll need a very big dose. He tipped all the green pills, hundreds and hundreds of them, into the saucepan. There was an old stick lying on the bench that had been used for stirring paint. George picked it up and started to stir his marvellous concoction. The mixture was as thick as cream, and as he stirred and stirred, many wonderful colours rose up from the depths and blended together, pinks, blues, greens, yellows and browns. George went on stirring until it was well mixed. But even so, there were still hundreds of pills lying on the bottom that hadn't melted. And there was his mother's splendid powder puff floating on the surface. I shall have to boil it all up, George said. One good quick boil on the stove is all it needs. And with that, he staggered back towards the house with the enormous, heavy saucepan. On the way, he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find any other interesting things. He added the following: half a pint of engine oil to keep Grandma's engine going smoothly, some antifreeze to keep her radiator from freezing up in winter, a handful of grease to grease her creaking joints, then back to the kitchen. It sounds like George has made quite the medicine. On Thursday, we asked you to have a look back through chapter 3 and see how many items you could write down that George found in each room. Have a look at the list on the screen here. We've got all sorts of different things that George put into his potion. There was shampoo, nail varnish, face cream, flea powder, curry powder, peppercorns, lipsticks, all sorts of things. I think Grandma's in trouble. Today, you're going to be George. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not going around and mixing up as many things as you can find. That would be a little bit too dangerous. But we do want you to go around your home and find as many interesting things as you can that you might want to put in that medicine. But I have a big warning for you. This is really, really important. The George from chapter 3 was far more sensible than the George in this chapter that we've just read. Because in chapter 3, we look at the book here. In the bathroom, he gazed longingly at the famous and dreaded medicine cupboard, but he didn't go near it. It was the only thing in the entire house he was forbidden to touch. He had made solemn promises to his parents about this, and he wasn't going to break them. So, that George was far more sensible than the George in this chapter. He didn't touch anything he knew he wasn't allowed to. And that's what we need to make sure that you do today. If you want to look in cupboards or places at home that you're not normally allowed to look into, or you're not sure if you're allowed in them, please check with an adult first. Don't go touching anything you shouldn't or blowing up your house, because then I'll get in trouble with your parents, okay? Today's task is on Google Classroom, although if you don't have access to Google Classroom, you can just do it on paper. So as I said, what I want you to do is have a look around your home and see if you can find lots of interesting things that you might want to put in Grandma's medicine. You need to describe them using adjectives and then write them in the list. You could also use alliteration if you wanted to. I've written one for you already. I've written stinking stripy socks. That'll give the medicine a really interesting smell. You need to make a list of at least 10 items. You can write more if you want to and be as terrible as you want to. And we really look forward to reading it when you hand it in. That's it for today. You go off exploring and I'll see you tomorrow.